4 months ago, I made a YouTube video that showcased a hunter build that I'd been using, and it recently got indirectly buffed due to the recent buffs to the Arc toolkit. Ever since I made that initial video, I've been using it in every single piece of PvE content Destiny 2 has to offer. I used it in contest mode Vesper's Host. I used it for my solo flawless master Vesper's Host. I used it in contest Sunder Doctrine. I used it in my solo flawless master Sunder Doctrine. I used it in master raids, dungeons, nightfalls, exotic quests, and more. And I'm always being asked, build? Dimlink? And sometimes I'll get told, hey, I finally tried out that build you've been using. I don't know why I hadn't earlier. It's so good. I mean to say this when I say this is the best hunter build in the game, and it's not even close. The build is based around Gifted Conviction, which releases 3 tracking arc projectiles when you cast Ascension or Tempest Strike. These projectiles jolt targets, and jolting targets within 15 meters of yourself provides a stack of damage resistance for 10 seconds. This damage resistance can be between 25 to 50% DR, depending on how many jolted target instances there were. When this most recent episode launched, Bungie also buffed Amplified to give you a flat-out 15% damage resistance while amped. Proccing Ascension immediately gives you Amplified, and Ascension happens to be on both Arc and Prismatic, so we have 2 toolkits we can build this into. This means by casting Ascension, we're immediately receiving 2 sources of damage resistance. Bungie also just introduced this new Arc term called Bolt Charge. Once you have a stack of Bolt Charge, dealing weapon damage increases the stacks up to x10. Once at x10, ability damage will cause a lightning strike at the target's location, which deals large damage. This episode, there's an artifact mod called Dielectric, where defeating arc debuffed targets grants Bolt Charge, so these are jolted or blinded targets, but there's also the new Psychopomp, which is the arc area denial GL from the seasonal activities. This has the new perk Rolling Storm, which has final blows grant you a stack of Bolt Charge, while amplified you would gain 2 stacks of Bolt Charge. Psychopomp is an absolute must-have for this build, as it makes gaining Bolt Charge super fast. It will increase the stacks of Bolt Charge as you're dealing damage as well, which means that you're going to get to x10 so fast. There's the artifact mod Flashover, which causes your lightning bolts from Bolt Charge to deal 150% more damage, and there's also Defibrillating Blast, which causes champion stuns to instantly take you to x10 Bolt Charge, and using that Bolt Charge will not only heal you, but will also jolt nearby combatants. I use this build on Prismatic Hunter, and that's not to say that it's not effective on Arc Hunter. I'd choose this on Prismatic Hunter because I find the gameplay loop more satisfying, and I think there's a lot more unique build crafting that you can do with this. The toolkit that I use in the dungeons involves the following fragments: Purpose, Hope, Protection, Awakening, and Dawn. Purpose gives me Woven Mail, but depending on your super, you could also get the recently buffed Frost Armor or Restoration. Hope allows me to gain my class ability back very fast due to constantly being amplified. Protection gives me 15% DR while surrounded. Awakening, honestly, I chose for the 10 Resilience, and Dawn I chose to give myself Radiant. If you already have 100 Resilience and you don't need Awakening, I recommend Sacrifice. Another recent buff to Ascension was allowing it to proc the 3 different dodges. So if you have Marksman's Dodge, Ascension will reload your equipped weapon. Gambler's Dodge will refresh your melee, and Radiant Dodge will give you Radiant for 10 seconds, which is completely useless because Gambler's Dodge into a melee with Fast of Dawn will give you Radiant for 5 seconds. I highly recommend Gambler's Dodge with Threaded Spike or Smoke Bomb. Threaded Spike is, in my opinion, the best melee on Prismatic, as it allows you to sever nearby targets, and with this you're constantly going to get Threaded Spike, so you're constantly going to be able to sever targets. There's an artifact mod this season called Disruptor Spike, which moves severing targets from doing 40% less damage to doing 52% less damage. You can pair this with Photonic Flare to also release a blinding burst if you kill severed targets with arc damage. So if you throw a Threaded Spike and then ascend and kill those severed targets, you're going to release a blinding burst so any targets that don't die are now blind. For my other aspect, I chose Stylish Executioner. This makes it so that killing jolted targets makes me invis, and I can then use that to my advantage to set up another Ascension or get out of a risky scenario if needed. If you don't like Threaded Spike, Smoke Bomb would be my recommendation, as it's nice to weaken or suppress targets, but I really think its utility value is significantly lower than Threaded Spike. What makes Prismatic better than Arc in my opinion is how much damage resistance you can have at a given time. So Woven Mail is 45%. Gifted Conviction at the lowest stacks of damage resistance is 25%. Protection is 15% and Amplified is now 15%. So even without considering Gifted Conviction at its strongest, or damage resistance while Transcendent, or the fact that we sever targets, just these four give us 70% damage resistance. If we manage to have Transcendence, that's going to get us up to 76% damage resistance. Now let's say we've used Sever on nearby targets due to us always having our Threaded Spike, which is making these enemies do 52% less damage. That's going to take us from 76% DR all the way up to 89% damage resistance. And if we happen to have Gifted Conviction at max stacks, which usually isn't the case, usually it's stack 1 or stack 2, but let's say we did, that would get us up to 92% DR. This means if we run into an engagement, ascend on the enemies to gain DR from Gifted Conviction and Amplified, and then sever the targets using our newly acquired Thread Spike from that Ascension, we could have anywhere from 89 to 92% damage resistance, which means it's going to be very difficult for us to die. Threaded Spike also builds Transcendence Darkness energy very fast, and Psychopomp is going to build Light Transcendence energy very fast, meaning you're constantly going to have Transcendence ready to go. So that's the benefits of Prismatic. This loadout is also viable on Arc, and Ascension now gives you 3 fragment slots on Arc, meaning we have 5 fragments to pair this with, whereas before it was only 4. For the Arc loadout, I use Resistance, Shock, Amplitude, Beacons, and Ions as the fragments. You could swap one of these out for Discharge, but I think those are the 5 better ones to use. So I've always found that the Arc loadout is nicer to use in less difficult content, or in GMs where not everything is shooting at you at once, so you don't need all that increased damage resistance. Resistance is going to give us 25% DR while surrounded, Shock lets our grenades jolt, Amplitude makes rapid kills while we're amplified drop orbs, Beacon is going to let our Arc special weapons blind targets while we're amplified, and Psychopomp happens to be an Arc special weapon. And then Ions makes it so that defeating those jolted targets are going to give us ionic traces. When I run this on Arc, you can choose whether to use Gambler's Dodge with Combination Blow or Disorienting Blow, or Marksman's Dodge. That is personal preference. I've never found one that I'm like, I need to use this on Arc, so you try them, let me know which ones you prefer. The other thing that's awesome about this loadout is that it has so much variety in terms of weapons and mods that you can pair this with. That being said, I do highly recommend Psychopomp if you have a Rolling Storm roll. I actually don't have this roll, and I'm going to be grinding for one soon. This is also a great loadout with the double sword loadout, so Perfect Fifth Caster Frame or Arc Waveframe Ergo Sum, and then Ill Omen with Attrition Orbs Cold Steel. That's what I used for first encounter Sunder Doctrine on contest mode. The swords are great because with the damage resistance, you can play very aggressively with minimal risk. Attrition Orbs Cold Steel Ill Omen is always my recommendation for your heavy sword, as Attrition Orbs heals you due to recuperation, and it will also refresh your Woven Mail or Frost Armor Timer if you're on Prismatic. My go-to loadout for this right now would be the Multi-Mac Banshee Cells with Attrition Orbs Kinetic Tremors, Psychopomp with Eddy Current Rolling Storm, and a heavy that fits the scenario. If I'm doing second encounter Sunder Doctrine, I would want Anarchy. If I'm doing third encounter, I would want Queenbreaker. If I'm doing a non-boss encounter in a raid, I'll almost always resort to Ill Omen. If I need to take down beefy targets fast, maybe I want Parasite. You see how we're going. There's a lot of different variety that you can bring here. In terms of mods on your armor, what I recommend is on your helmet, you use Siphon mods, and if you're using Arc, Ashes to Assets, and if you're using Prismatic, Hands-On. On your gauntlets, I recommend 2 focusing strikes and a bolstering detonation so you can get your class ability back even quicker. Because we're on Gambler's Dodge instead of Marksman's Dodge, we're no longer getting our dodge back with 3 seconds remaining on Amplified. It's now taking us about 1 second after Amplified ends. The moment that we add in a focusing strike or a bolstering detonation, that fixes that and gets us our class ability back slightly earlier than when Amplified would end. Chest piece, always use resist mods based on the activity you're running. Legs, you always want at least recuperation. You can use both recuperation and better already to get a small bit of health and immediately start health regeneration, but if you don't want to do that, scavenger mods or absolution is always a great choice as well. And if you're using parasite, I would swap out that scavenger mod for a solar holster. And then on your class item, special finisher and proximity ward. Special finisher is going to allow you to spam special finishers to get psychopomp ammo or ergo sum ammo or whatever your special weapon is. And if you're not using a special weapon, you can run Font of Restoration. Unfortunately, Ascension does not proc Powerful Attraction. If it did, that would be best in slot, no questions asked. For stat mods, Resilience should always be your priority, then Discipline. You don't really need Mobility because you're using Fast of Hope or Flow State, which will affect your base mobility cooldown. Intellect is completely useless in PvE, so your third choice would be Recovery, and then Strength as a fourth choice. That being said, because I recommend Gambler's Dodge, Strength is also quite useless, so don't prioritize any Strength unless you happen to be using Marksman's Dodge and you need that extra melee, in which case I would probably put Strength as the third place. Please, if you have not ever given this build a try, please give it a try. Let me know in the comments what activity you tried it with and whether or not you used it on Arc or Prismatic. If you enjoyed today's video, please consider dropping a like and subscription as it really does help out the channel and lets me make more videos like this one more frequently.